1, 2, 3, 4.
I declare war!
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Harriet, and these are all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 2. So guys, after Blood and Cheese, I knew we were going to be in for some drama, and this episode didn't disappoint. And before I go any farther, guys, I want to show you these brand new Eric and Eric pointing meme shirts that we designed at our merch store. We also have our Team Green and Team Black baseball tees. Guys, we love designing these shirts for you, and shopping our merch store helps us make more videos like this one. The links are below. So last week, we broke down the new opening credits. So if you want our full breakdown of that, be sure to check out our last video. I also mentioned that when the opening title plays, the tapestry was still being woven. And while we didn't see any new details this episode, I do think we're going to see more and more scenes depicted on this tapestry in the future. The writer of this week's episode is Sarah Hess, who's actually a producer for both Season 1 and 2. She's also written episodes for other great shows like Orange is the New Black, House, and Deadwood. The director is Claire Kilner, who's also directed a few other shows that we've covered on this channel like Fallout and Gen V. We open with a shot that slowly comes into focus as we see Jaehaerys' bloody sheets. Now, last episode ended with Helena completely shell-shocked. She was so out of it that she didn't even notice Alison and Sir Criston having sex. This shot almost reflects her mental state, completely disassociated with only the bloodiest moments sticking out. But this also reminds us of the bloody sheets after Aemma gives birth in the first episode of the show. Remember, that was another Sophie's Choice moment. Viserys had to choose between cutting the baby out and definitely losing Aemma, or to wait and possibly losing both of them. Now, in both of these cases, innocent blood was spilled for the sake of the Iron Throne succession, but we'll get into that later. We see castle residents ushered out of their rooms. Now, this is actually a microcosm for what will happen in many of the cities in Westeros once fighting starts. None of these people know what's going on. They're just being jostled and pushed, caught in the crossfire of two warring families. One man even slips, sending gray dust flying, which could represent the ashes left by dragonfire. We cut to Aegon destroying his father's model of Valyria. Now, this was his father's pride and joy, but it represents more than that. Viserys tinkered with this model for years. The only reason he could do that was because Westeros was at peace. Other than the skirmishes and the stepstones, Viserys never ruled during battle time. Aegon destroying this model signals that peacetime is over. There's no more time for artistic models because they have to focus on actual battle plans. It also signifies Aegon's turn from his father ideals. Viserys strove for peace. He even went too far sometimes, acting completely conflict avoidant. Aegon, on the other hand, is itching for combat and bloodshed. The model also represents Viserys' obsession with the past. Rather than focus on building his current kingdom and the troubles around him, he preferred to turn his gaze backwards, to dream of what it would have been like to live in old Valyria. This is one of many reasons why Viserys was not a very good king. The destruction of the model also symbolizes how the glory of old Valyria is now truly gone, and the dance of the dragons has begun. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but let's just say that things don't work out great for the Targaryens after this show. One thing that really sets House of the Dragon apart from other fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings is that most fantasies feature characters who are very much like archetypes. They are just one thing, like they are brave or kind. But in real life, people aren't just one thing. We make mistakes, we suffer trauma, and after a while, we let those past traumas start to dominate our way of thinking and decision making. Like, I've noticed that I've developed some isolationist habits during the pandemic that were leading to social anxiety, overworking myself, and facial tics. So I signed up for BetterHelp, the sponsor of this video, and I met a therapist who helped me to understand the core of my anxiety and become a more well-rounded person. Because therapists can help you to understand why you react with anxiety or anger. Like, I don't know where I would be in my life if it weren't for therapy. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have been through hard times. I mean, I know I have. I had a 2-year span in my life where it seemed like everything that could go wrong went wrong. It was, just to sum it up, a really dark time. And that is why I'm telling you that if you are dealing with events like those, therapy can help. And that's why we're proud to be sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp makes it easy to connect you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. To start, use our link in the description and answer a few basic questions so BetterHelp can match you with a professional. Now, you can have your sessions from your phone, your computer, a phone call, video chat, or messaging, however you feel most comfortable. You'll be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you can get started fast. And if the therapist isn't a good fit, then you can switch at any time. So let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/ScreenCrush or choose ScreenCrush during sign up to receive a special discount on your first month. Now, back to House of the Dragon. Aegon also says,
I'll kill them all!
which is a reference to the Mad King Aerys.
Burn them all!
We also cut to Aemond, and once again we see the painting of Harrenhal's destruction over his shoulder.
Jeez, this guy gives me the creeps.
I know, right? And I will say there is some foreshadowing with the placement of this tapestry in Aemond. If you've read the book, you know, and if you don't, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's not that big of a deal. We pan up on Alison, and notice now she's wearing her 7-pointed star necklace. When we last saw her in bed with Sir Criston, the necklace was off. Now we find out later in the episode that she feels guilty about her sins, so this necklace is a way to reaffirm her faith. She also has 7-pointed star candle holders. Remember, the Hightowers are one of the oldest, most pious families in all of Westeros, but their family motto is also, "We light the way." A 7-pointed star candle holder blends their religion and their house words. I also found this line very interesting.
You've done to Micah.
It's one of the few times Alison openly puts her emotions before duty, even if it is just for a moment. Jaehaerys was the next heir to the Iron Throne. By Green Team logic, his death should be the hardest, not only because he's family, but because he was Aegon's legacy. Helaena, on the other hand, is a daughter, oftentimes pushed aside and used only as an accessory to her brothers. Alison's concern for her daughter, the so-called less important of the two, is a bold act for her. We cut to the small council, and we can see the war map they used last episode. It even has a small 7-pointed star at the top, undoubtedly a Hightower edition. Aegon says,
I'm bad! Instead of safeguarding the sanctity of my family.
Now, this is actually a double meaning. In this case, Aegon means the life of his family. Sir Criston failed to protect his family from death, but sanctity can also mean holiness. We heard in the last scene that Alison thinks this is a punishment for sinning.
The gods punish us. They punish me.
And Sir Criston sinned with her. Not only did he fail to protect Alison's sanctity, but he personally violated it. Aegon also says,
There she sits across the bay on her rock, laughing at me.
later we hear Aemond lament about his childhood.
They used to tease me, you know.
Now, all of the kids teased him, but Aegon spearheaded it. His own cruel nature is affecting his worldview. He thinks that Rhaenyra must be so cruel that she laughs at the death of his child. I also love this small detail in Aegon's costume. His shirt is unbuttoned, which reflects that he's frantic and he just haphazardly threw his shirt on. But it also splits the dragon on his shirt in two. It can symbolize the warring sides of his family or a dragon being wounded. After all, the Targaryens often call themselves dragons, and Aegon just got a pretty nasty mental wound. He calls this guy Ironrod. Now, this is Jasper Wilde, the Master of Laws. They called him Ironrod because he was so strict about the laws. So Aegon means Ironrod as an insult, basically insinuating that he is too uptight and, too law-abiding.
Law-abiding. I'm done.
Then Otto says this.
If we in the keep are still in peril, in another sense, of course, it doesn't matter.
So last week I saw people complain about the fact that Blood and Cheese differed from the books, mainly that it was less brutal. But remember, in the books, we know everything isn't accurate. In universe, the book Fire and Blood is Archmaester Gillen's attempt to understand the multiple accounts and rumors about the Targaryens during this time. It would make complete sense that Otto and Larys exaggerated the brutality of Blood and Cheese in order to gain more sympathy from the small folk. After all, we got to see firsthand how brutal it was. They only ever heard about it. Otto also says,
Jaehaerys will do more for us now than 1,000 knights in battle.
and this is actually heartbreaking. Jaehaerys already died as a pawn in an adult war. Obviously, Daemon didn't mean to kill him, but he still did. Even in death, Jaehaerys isn't given peace. No, his dead body must be used as a pawn. Otto also mentions the Silent Sisters.
Let the Silent Sisters ready the prince for his final journey.
Now, the Silent Sisters are a special group of septas, which are basically nuns in Westeros, who prepare bodies for death, and, as the name implies, they have taken a vow of silence. We first saw them in the first episode of Game of Thrones when they were preparing Jon Arryn's body, and we also saw them last season when Vaemond Valerion died. We cut to Helaena. Now notice that she is gripping the blanket that she was embroidering at the beginning of last episode. I think she was always embroidering this for her son, and now it holds special significance to her, a reminder of just yesterday when she had both of her children. She's also still in the room with Jaehaerys. Now notice Alison is leaning on Jaehaerys' crib. It's subtle, but it shows just how disconnected Alison is from her emotions. She's put everything aside to serve the crown. Much like Jaehaerys, Helaena is also a pawn.
The realm must see the sorrow of the crown, a sorrow best expressed through its most gentle soul.
She's been through one of the most horrific things imaginable, but she isn't allowed to grieve privately or even to make decisions for herself. Her grief has to be exploited, and the whole thing is just heartbreaking. Now, I love seeing all the common folk in the street gathering for the procession. It's in such stark contrast to the last time we saw this, right before Aegon's coronation. We see Jaehaerys carried in, and if you look closely, you can even see his head bobble out of time with his body. It's a small detail, but it sends a shiver up your spine. Also, I like that we see the gold cloaks. Remember, in the small council, they said,
"We would do well to ascertain if this is your sister's hand, or if there is a serpent nestled closer to our bosoms."
That's the gold cloaks. Even though only one person let Daemon into the city, many of them are still very loyal to Daemon, and these are the people who are sworn to protect the high towers. Also, notice that all the emblems have already changed to gold in order to signify the difference between Rhaenyra and Aegon. The gold dragon is a symbol of Aegon's dragon, Sunfire. It's also disgusting that they say this:
Behold the works of Rhaenyra Targaryen!
Otto said this child would be honored, but his own funeral procession is barely about him. Now, we have seen this path marched another time, and it was when Cersei was shamed by the church. Just like in Cersei's march, this is all political theater. When Helena looks up, she focuses on the petals in the sky, which looks suspiciously like the ashes Daenerys saw in her visions in Season 2. So we know that Helena is a dragon dreamer, otherwise known as prophetic. I wonder if she's seen the destruction to come from the Dance of Dragons, or if she's seen even further into the future, all the way to the destruction of King's Landing and Game of Thrones. Helena gets overwhelmed. Now, in modern terms, we'd probably say she had a panic attack. Warning for very minor spoilers from the book. Skip to the next time code if you want to avoid this spoiler. Now you have officially been warned. In the book, Helena never mentally recovers from losing Jaehaerys. She is a broken woman for the rest of her life. Now, in the book, it's simply because of what she witnessed. And look, watching your child get murdered is horrific, so that makes complete sense to me. But in the show, I think this, the funeral procession, will be the straw that breaks the Targaryens' back. After witnessing the most traumatizing event possible, she is not given any time to heal. Instead, she is instantly put on display. And not only that, but she is surrounded by tons of people that she doesn't know. On top of her child being murdered, someone broke into her house. The Red Keep is supposed to be safe and guarded, but someone still slipped in. She's probably scared of people. She may even wonder if anybody is there to finish the job. And this will only compound her trauma, creating the broken woman that we see in the books. Welcome back, you people who wanted to avoid spoilers. Now, I also think it would make sense given this line from Alison.
But what they've done to Micah?
She's horrified by the trauma inflicted on her daughter, yet she inflicts trauma of her own when she insists that Helena act in the best interest of the crown. Now, while all of this is happening, we're cutting to Aegon torturing Blood. Two things. First, notice that the knights are wearing Hightower sigils. This isn't officially sponsored by the crown. Two, Aegon beats Blood to death before he can even tell him that he was actually hired to kill Aemond. This is showing how people are acting rashly with high tempers instead of taking a moment to gather all the information so they can avoid war. We cut to Dragonstone, and I love how everyone is suspicious of Rhaenyra while Daemon's just like,
"Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious."
Also, notice how Rhaenyra's neckline actually does form a dragon, and her necklace looks like a dragon head but with 3 rings on it. One for Rhaenys, Visenya, and Aegon. That is such a brilliant little costuming touch. When they get into a fight, Daemon says,
"I cannot be responsible for a
Cannot be
mistake."
responsible.
Now this is actually a brilliant way to show that Daemon would not be a good ruler. If Aemon died, he would have taken all the glory. But when the plan goes wrong, he refuses to take responsibility. Rhaenyra says,
"But now I have seen that your heart belongs only to you. And when I was a child, I took this as a challenge, but I'm older now. I have challenges enough."
So this is about so much more than just Jaehaerys. This is about the power that Daemon wielded over Rhaenyra, especially when she was a teenager. Putting the incest aside, Daemon went after Rhaenyra when she was still very young and pliable. Unfortunately, this isn't out of character for Daemon. Let me read this really upsetting passage from Fire and Blood. "Nor should it be forgotten that, during Daemon's youth, every brothel keeper in King's Landing knew that Daemon took an especial delight in maidens and kept aside the youngest, prettiest, and most innocent of their new girls for him to deflower." This gives an unsavory picture of him as a man who wants inexperienced girls.
Trying to strike a chord, and it's probably A minor.
Remember, Rhaenyra was inexperienced, both sexually and in life. She'd never been to Flea Bottom prior to her uncle helping her visit. Daemon literally guided her there. He liked that Rhaenyra was young because he could control her, but she grew into an adult without him when she married Laenor. Now, she is not only an independent person, but she's also the queen, the one person in all of Westeros who doesn't have to listen to anybody. And Daemon still wants to control her and by virtue control the throne. He even says,
"To give up my brother's throne."
He can't view Rhaenyra as a full-grown woman, ready to rule. He still views her as a child. On that note, notice what he says here.
"He made you heir because of your great wisdom. Because of your virtue.
He ruined her virtue. So much of this entire show could have been prevented if he hadn't taken her to that brothel. And remember, even back then, people shifted the blame to her for going there.
It was foolish of you to place yourself in a position where your virtue could even come into question.
When he leaves Dragonstone, we get a look at his armor, and man, I love how far this costume department goes. Not only does he have a dragon helmet and 2 dragons on his breastplate, but he has actual dragon scales etched into his torso. Also, we find out later that he probably went to Harrenhal.
Yeah, why does he want Harrenhal so bad?
Well, Doug, Harrenhal is a giant castle in the center of the map. It borders the Kingslands, the Westerlands, the Riverlands, and the Vale. Strategically, it's very important, and it's a very difficult castle to breach. If the Hightowers got it, then they would be able to strike at Rhaenyra. But if Rhaenyra's forces take Harrenhal, it gives her forces a place together where they can strike outward against the forces of the Hightowers. We cut to Rhaenyra playing with her children. If you look closely, you can see their dollhouse is actually a replica of Dragonstone. Like Helena with the petals, Rhaenyra is distracted by the dust, and the dust looks suspiciously like ashes. But it's also difficult to ignore the similarities between Rhaenyra playing with her children and Helena playing with her children. We even take a moment to linger on the toys of each child. This shows us that this is fundamentally a mother's war. Every woman is trying to protect her kids, but ultimately this war is taken to extremes by men. We cut back to the Red Keep with Alison and Sir Criston. Alison says Sir Criston is
one who seeks absolution.
She's actually referencing when he confessed sleeping with Rhaenyra. Remember, she did not have to press at all for that information. He just folded like a deck of cards.
Rather lapses.
It happened, Your Grace. The sin you allude to. I have committed it.
Now, when Alicent strips down for her bath, there is a religious aspect to this, especially because she's completely by herself. In Game of Thrones, we saw the High Sparrow force Cersei to be stripped down to be absolved of her sins, and Alicent is undergoing something similar here, although her nudity is in private and Cersei was forced to bear her shame in front of all of King's Landing. Now, I love all of the shots in this next scene. They actually shoot this a bit like a horror movie, and it shows how much blood and cheese unnerved everyone in the castle. The Red Keep doesn't feel safe anymore. Horror movies often use weird angles and negative space to create a feeling of dread. The odd angles throw off our equilibrium, while the wide shots make us feel like something is lurking nearby. We even get this interesting, almost POV shot through Alison's screen, as if someone is watching her. But this framing could also represent the ghosts of Alicent and Sir Criston's shared past. Now, I didn't realize it until I watched the house the dragons built, but Alicent is no longer in the Queen's quarters. Now she is in Rhaenyra's old quarters. The design team said this:
"We changed a little bit of the furniture, but we wanted it to be apparent there was the constant memory of Rhaenyra being in this room."
And now Sir Criston is waiting outside that same door, committing the same sin. Talk about deja vu. Also, notice the dragon torch next to Sir Criston here. Now, the Red Keep was built for the Targaryens, but during the show Game of Thrones, we rarely got to see this influence because Robert Baratheon removed everything that had the image of a dragon. So it's great to see all of the little original architectural details. We cut to the next morning where Sir Criston is angry with Sir Eric.
What is this? It's a reminder of yesterday, I think. I'll replace it, Hans. Do it now.
Now, this is clearly a deflection. The white cloak is supposed to represent all of those things, and we saw last season how important it was to Sir Criston.
I saw my white cloak. It is the only thing I have to my name.
But the white cloaks are just that, a representation. They mean nothing without the men's honor. Sir Criston feels guilty about betraying his vow, so he's turning to superficial things to absolve himself. But his sullied cloak also represents the work that he is asked to do. Instead of the noble work of a knight, Sir Eric has to do the dirty work of an assassin. In fact, the entire conversation is Sir Criston deflecting.
And why has Helena the Queen been granted no sworn protector? Surely once she ascended, she should have...
Brother is a thief and a traitor to the crown.
It's clear that Jaehaerys was unguarded, not because Sir Eric didn't do his duties, but because Sir Criston didn't give a personal guard to Helena or to Aegon's heir.
Instead of safeguarding the sanctity of my family.
As a commander of the White Cloaks, the responsibility was on him. That very night, instead of protecting Jaehaerys, he was off breaking his oath. We cut to Dragonstone with Baela. Now, it's interesting that she's wielding a crossbow when scorpions are basically giant crossbows that kill dragons.
Yeah, if you can't beat them, join them.
Good one, my guy. High five. Also, remember that these two are betrothed. Rhaenys betrothed them in a split-second decision to side with the Blacks over the heir to Driftmark.
As a matter of fact, the Princess Rhaenyra has just informed me of her desire to marry her sons Jace and Luke to Lord Corlys's granddaughters, Baela and Rhaena.
Baela says,
"Sometimes I think I hate him."
Sheesh, that came out of nowhere.
Kind of, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Daemon was never the best father.
Father ignores me.
and he didn't comfort his children at all after their mother, Lena, died. In fact, he was cruel.
What are children but a weakness?
Lena also wanted to go back to Driftmark, but Daemon wanted to stay in Pentos. As a result, she died far away from her family, and maybe the Maesters of Driftmark could have saved her life. Then he shipped Baela off to her grandmother as a ward, so I'm not surprised that she resents him. Now, I really like how this show treats both Laenor and Harwin Strong.
He taught us to catch fish. He had a weakness for cake.
And Sir Harwin Strong?
He was gentle and fierce.
I've said before that the affair wasn't the smartest decision, but I don't think it was immoral at all. Laenor and Rhaenyra had an agreement, and who am I to judge what a married couple agrees to in bed? In a show with so many terrible parents, it's really refreshing to see children get two loving father figures, even if they both die. We cut to a brothel, and the first sex worker that we see has Targaryen white hair. Now, there's a small chance she is from across the Narrow Sea, and that's why her hair is silver, but it's much more likely that she is a Targaryen bastard. Judging by her age, I would guess either Daemon's or Viserys's. Remember, Viserys got around too.
When we were Rhaenyra's age, we our way through most of the brothels on the Street of Silk.
It's subtle, but it's a great way to show the damage that these royals are leaving in their wake. This girl was probably born in a brothel and never really had a chance to escape. This is her life, while for Daemon or Viserys, this was just one night that they probably don't even remember. Then we cut to Aemond cuddling with a brothel madam, the same sex worker who was implied took his virginity. Now, he is extremely exposed. For one, he is in the fetal position, which represents how he's still just an embarrassed little boy, but he's also not wearing his eye patch. Now, we've only seen him without his eye patch one other time, when he challenged Lucerys. We've never seen him without it in a moment of vulnerability. He's obviously taking comfort in this madam, and it's no coincidence that she's old enough to be his mom. He even ran to her when he was embarrassed by Otto.
I was out.
You were with me.
We'll get more into the Green's family dysfunction later on, but for now, let's just say that Aemond has some mommy issues. The madam says,
I would remind you only that when princes lose their temper, it is often others who suffer. A small fact.
Now, this is a reference to some things we may see later in the season. Now, I'm not going to spoil it for you, so I'll just leave it there. We've also already seen some common people murdered when Rhaenys burst through the sept floors, but I also want to focus on the actual word small folks. So far, the only casualties of the war were actual children, quite literally, small folks, and both of them died because of a prince who lost his temper. Even within their own family, the youngest and most vulnerable die first. We cut to a regular household in King's Landing, and in case you don't recognize him, he's actually the Smith from last episode.
If we could but have the crown's coin before we started work.
His name is Hugh Hammer, and again, no spoilers, but this guy is going to be very important. But even now, Hugh is already serving an important role. It's very easy to get caught up in all of the royalty drama and forget who the royalty is actually supposed to serve, the common folk. It's something that our characters forget too. But as the ever-wise Tyrion Lannister says,
you might find it difficult to rule over millions who want you dead.
Then we switch to Driftmark. Now, I made a mistake last week. We said that this guy was Adam of Hall, when really, he was Alan of Hall. I was watching without subtitles, and I misheard the name.
Are you sure you weren't just really excited about Adam of Hall? So then when you heard a name starting with A, your brain just filled in what it wanted to hear?
Maybe. My bad, guys. Now, this is the actual Adam of Hall. And like I said last week, keep your eyes on him. There is a reason that Corlys owes him a favor. Also, I love this line from Corlys in bed with Rhaenys.
Daemon flies when we most need his hand at the oar.
Instead of saying take the wheel or take the reins, he just has to show how much of a boat guy he is. We cut to Rhaenyra on Dragonstone, and notice she is consulting books. Remember, when he lived in Pentos, Daemon read history books about the Targaryens constantly. He was grasping onto the good old days, and I think that Rhaenyra is kind of doing the same thing here. And like I mentioned earlier, she's also taking after her father, who is desperate to relive the glory days of Valyria. Now, as she looks through the book, we see an illustration of Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys. On the next page, we see Visenya and Vhagar. Now, I think that she is fighting in Dorne because the page to her right mentions the Martells and the First Dornish Wars. Now, it was Rhaenys who actually met the Martells and began battle, but this could be after Rhaenys' death. Then Mysaria walks in, so it's really interesting to compare the Mysaria of Season 1, Episode 2, and the Mysaria of Season 2, Episode 2. In Season 1, she was supposed to become a lady. Daemon said that he would marry her, and remember how she said,
I came to you to be liberated.
Liberated? From what?
Fear.
Well, now we see what she meant. Then we get this very interesting speech from Mysaria.
For too long, I made it my aim to be of consequence. But now, I see that was the wish of a child.
Now, of course, this isn't just about Massaria's history. This is about the plight of all women in Westeros. There's nothing Rhaenyra can do that will make the lords of Westeros see her as the rightful ruler. There's nothing Alison can do to make her father and children respect her. These women are trying to win the game without realizing the rules are rigged and it's impossible. The only way to truly win is to stop trying to prove themselves to men. We cut to Adam of Hall, who pulls a crab out of the sand, and then he sees sea smoke flying above. Now remember, sea smoke was Laenor's dragon, who he left behind when he died. And the first time we saw sea smoke was when Laenor helped Daemon defeat the crab feeder. I think this is a really clever scene because it shows where a lowly commoner like Adam of Hall is right now, digging his hands into the sand to survive. And then he looks up and he sees the glory of the royal family, the dragons. We cut to the Red Keep and all the rat catchers are hanged just to kill Cheese. Now this actually has a very long and cool butterfly effect. Following this incident, only cats were used to catch rats in the Red Keep. And that's why, all the way in Game of Thrones, Arya has to capture a cat when she is training with Syrio. It's also why we have Tommen's beloved cat, Sir Pounce. We cut to Aegon and the ruins of the Valyria model are being wheeled out. He has officially turned away from the peaceful nature of his father. This scene pits two extremes against each other. The first side is extreme passion and recklessness exemplified by Aegon, and the next side is near sociopathic levels of calculation exemplified by Otto. Neither of them is portrayed as good. Aegon has just murdered innocent men, but it's hard to side with Otto when he says things like this.
With your child's blood, we bought their approval.
This scene also shows why the Targaryens and the Hightowers would just never get along. They are just too different. The Hightowers want planning, caution, spilled ink, while the Targaryens want power and fire and might and spilled blood. I will say though, it was kind of awesome to see Otto Hightower fight with his own grandson. He has been planning this for years, ever since Alison was a teenager. Aegon didn't even want to be king.
I did not ask for this.
And now Otto's own plan has come back to bite him in the ass.
You are my father's hand, not mine.
It's also the first time we ever see Otto show any genuine admiration for Viserys. Now Viserys may have been weak, but that's better than headstrong and violent like his son. Also, I just want to stress how dumb it is to make Sir Criston Cole hand to the king. He has no official political experience. Oh, and yeah, Jaehaerys just died on his watch. Helena did not even have her own guard. He literally failed up.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So we cut back to Dragonstone as Massaria is leaving. Notice she even has a little smile. She's happy to be getting the hell out of Westeros. Now, of course, it's especially meaningful because she was pulled from her home city against her will. Now, she did not have to mention Sir Eric's twin. She could have just kept going, but she stopped. Now, this makes me think that she's actually going to hang around a little bit longer, and this will win her some favor with the queen. Also, notice that Rhaenyra keeps stepping forward as her handmaiden braids her hair. Braids can represent many things, but in this case, I think it represents family. With both Lucerys and Daemon gone, her family is rapidly falling apart. Also, notice that her handmaiden has a crest of 3 dragons on her chest, similar to the one that we see on the cover design of Fire and Blood. Then we get the Battle of the Twins, Sir Eric versus Sir Eric. Now, I just loved this fight. I thought it was great in every way. The way the music drops off and we just get the sounds of violence reminded me a lot of that famous fight in They Live. It's very grounded, no music, no slow-mo, no fancy speed grading. It's just a good old-fashioned knockdown, drag-out street sword fight with stunning choreography. But I will say, I kept thinking of this meme.
That man's an imposter. That man is the imposter.
Which of course is why we designed this Battle of the Twins parody shirt that you can get at our merch store. Also, in the book, there are several versions of this fight and no one quite knows which one is true. Some say that the brothers began with an I love you. Others say they didn't have a kind word for each other. Some say they died in each other's arms, wetting themselves with their tears. Others say that they died 4 days apart. But in the end, all of these accounts were just a little bit true. The brothers did say I love you, although not at the beginning of the fight. They do die together, but not in each other's arms. And most importantly, they don't truly slay one another. Sir Eric killed his brother and then he killed himself. Now, one of my favorite things about this show is how they get to fill in the gaps of all these stories from the book and flesh them out. And they did that perfectly here. I also thought that it was interesting that Sir Eric killed himself. Now, in the book, it seems like they just had a bloody fight to the death where neither could prevail. But I think it's much more powerful that he killed himself because he couldn't stand murdering his brother. This show has a ton of kinslaying, but this one scene really gets across how painful it really is. Also, So, under the laws of the Seven, kinslaying is one of the most heinous crimes a pious person can commit. We cut back to the Red Keep. Notice that Alison isn't wearing her 7-pointed star necklace anymore. Now she's wearing a necklace with multiple 7-pointed stars and 7-pointed earrings. It's a bit overkill. It's almost like she did something she feels guilty about she's compensating for.
You must be compensating for something.
We also get the first mention of Daeron, who I honestly was not sure would be in this show. Daeron is the youngest son of Alicent and Viserys, and it seems like he's been a ward of Hightower for his entire life. At least, we never see him with any of the other kids. In the book, he has a dragon named Tessarion, and who knows, maybe we'll get to see him. Now, one of the most telling things in this entire episode is,
I have sinned.
all Alicent wants is comfort. She has done everything her father asked. Even now, she's trying to get him back to Aegon's side. But he still can't love or comfort her. He won't even try. And immediately, we see the same pattern played out between Alicent and Aegon. No one on the Greens can actually rely on their family for love. Alicent can't get comfort from her father, so she can't comfort any of her own children. She neglects both Aegon and Helena emotionally in this episode, and Aemond literally buys motherly affection. The siblings can't even comfort each other, as we see with Aegon and Helena. They're all under the same roof, but the entire family is emotionally estranged. Compare that to Rhaenyra and her children. When Lucerys died, Rhaenyra comforted Jace as soon as she saw him. Jace remembers not just one loving father, but two. Though Daemon is volatile and somewhat removed, Rhaenyra shows her children that she cares about them, not just as potential heirs, but as people. So guys, that's everything that we caught in this episode. What did you guys think? How did you like season 2 so far? Big shout out to the writer of this video, Brianna McLarty. You can find her social links below and let us know your thoughts down in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.